Welcome in, everybody. It is Wild and Wacky Wednesday here on Main Street Sports today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. That is Calvin White. I am David Wilson. We're joining you for the next 2 hours as we talk local, regional, and national sports topics. Calvin Hughes coming from his respective home up in Clarksville, repping the A on the top of his head. I'm coming to you from my respective home here in Nashville. Calvin, how we doing? Happy Wednesday.
I'm good. You said it a little bit before we started the show. It feels like it takes multiple days after Friday to kind of recover from high school football. Us and our fellow colleagues. Blaine Keller, Maurice Patton, all those people. I know that all of us are up until well past 1, 2, 3 in the morning. Putting
The
stuff
wee
on the web.
hours of the morning.
Yeah,
The wee hours.
putting stuff on the website, but when duty calls, you gotta answer the phone, and,
Right?
we answer the phone, very often, it seems like.
It does, and even with this past weekend being a holiday weekend where Monday, Labor Day is a day off, I still found myself on the computer at points on Monday trying to come up with game plans for this week. It was a busy weekend for Blaine and I, as on Sunday we headed out to Nashville Super Speedway, had coverage of the Music City Grand Prix where Joseph Newgarden captures the checker flag in his home race and here in the Mid-State and closes his season with taking the captain Roger Penske to victory lane. So if you've not seen our IndyCar coverage from Sunday, feel free to go to the Wilson Post website or the Main Street Nashville as well. Got two good stories there for you, obviously on Newgarden and then with myself talking to IndyCar champion Alex Palou, who won his third straight and fourth overall NTT IndyCar title. Calvin, it's another sunny day here in the Mid-State. My grass is very brown, so hoping a rain shower will soon come to quench this drought that we've had in the Mid-State. But when it comes to this show in Main Street Sports today, here on a Wild and Wacky Wednesday, we got a good show for you. In the second hour, we would be joined for our weekly segment with Heather Williams from East Tennessee as we discuss the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. The playoffs started last Sunday night in the Southern 500. It was Chase Briscoe going back to back in the Southern 500 and moving on to the round of 12. He captured the checkered flag in Darlington, South Carolina. We'll talk to Heather, break down his dominant victory where he led over 300 laps in that one. And we get a little preview as the NASCAR Cup Series heads to St. Louis this weekend. They'll take on Worldwide Technology Raceway up in Gateway. So should be a great time talking to Heather as we normally do, catch up with her. We missed her last week as the media day happened for the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. So looking forward to being joined by Heather at 3:20 Central Time. Looking forward to having her on. Coming up in the next segment at 2:20, we'll be joined by our friend Caleb JARREAU from East Tennessee, the Daily Times. We'll talk a little Tennessee football as they obviously opened up their season last weekend in the Benz down in Atlanta, and they picked up a really good and quality win over Syracuse down there in Atlanta in Aflac kickoff. So looking forward to be joined by Caleb, who's also hopping on the high school beat up in East Tennessee on Friday night. So he's had some wee early Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings on his docket soon enough. Talk a little Braves here coming up. It seems like every time Calvin and I join you, we're discussing another loss, and that was the case last night down in in the Windy City as the Braves dropped their second consecutive game to the Chicago Cubs on the north side of Chicago. We'll also jump into the grab bag here at 3 o'clock as we dive into some news and notes across the world of sports, including college football, the NFL, as we prepare for kickoff tomorrow night of the NFL season, and also the U.S. Open going on in Flushing, Queens, up in New York. So, got a jam packed show for you. Looking forward to doing it. So, Calvin, without further ado, you ready to go? Ready to ride?
Let's do it.
Let's get into last night's scores and today's schedule on the rundown.
This is the rundown.
Across the TWA, it'll be some volleyball action to kick us off. It was BGA picking up a 3-1 win over Providence Christian in district play last night. It was Murfreesboro Central Magnet sweeping Battle Creek 3-0. It was Columbia Central picking up a 3-1 win over Lawrence County in district play there. It was Cookeville sweeping Lebanon 3-0. It was Blackman defeating Eagle in 5 sets 3-2. It was Spring Hill picking up a district win over Forest, also in 5 sets, 3-2. Middle Tennessee Christian swept Grace Christian Franklin 3-0. Lewis County with a 3-0 sweep over Hampshire as well. It was Oakland defeating Murfreesboro area rival Riverdale in straight sets last night, 3-0. Zion Christian 3-0 sweep over Perry County as well. It was Siegel picking up the sweep in district action over Rockville. Santa Fe also with the sweep over East Hickman 3-0. Smyrna in some district action as well. Swept Laverne. Summertown also picked up a sweep over Mount Pleasant 3-0. And it was Stewart's Creek taking a 5-setter against Wilson Central last night, 3-2. Lots of sweeps on the volleyball docket last night.
Looking at girls soccer results, Oakland wins 3-0 over Blackman. Clarksville shuts out West Creek 6-0. Stewart's Creek wins 6-1 over Cookville. Cornersville 7-4 winners over Richland. Colioca 5-1 over Loretto. Kirkwood wins 5-0 over Dixon County. Father Ryan 2, Page 1. Franklin Road Academy 10, Middle Tennessee Christian 0. Hillsboro shuts out Hunters Lane 8-0. McGavock wins 5-0 over Glencliff. Murfreesboro Central Magnet 6-0 over Spring Hill. Nashville Christian 2, Friendship Christian 0. Columbia and Nolansville tie 2 apiece. Pope John Paul II wins 8-1 over Harpeth. Portland wins 8-1 over Sycamore. Rockville beats Riverdale 4-1. Watertown 1-0 winners over Smith County. And Smyrna beats Laverne 4-1.
Last night in Major League Baseball here for us residents of Main Street Sports Today, it was the Cubs defeating the Braves 4-3. Kyle Tucker, who got injured in that one, had a 3-run homer in the first inning to help the Cubs pick up the win last night over the Bravos. Last night, it was the Yankees defeating Wade's Astros 7-1. For the Sounds up in Norfolk, Virginia, as they kicked off their series against the Tide. They won in extra innings last night, 4-3. In the W, it was the Phoenix Mercury picking up an 85-79 win over the reeling Indiana Fever. And it was the Golden State Valkyries picking up a 66-58 win over the New York Liberty.
Looking at tonight's prep volleyball schedule, not a heavy schedule, but Gallatin is at Good Pasture at 5:30. Siegel is at Franklin Christian at 6 p.m. and Eagleville is at Riverdale at 6 p.m. And girls soccer, Kip is at Nashville at Republic at 5 p.m. East Robertson is at McGavock at 5:30. Montgomery Central at Rossview, CPA at BGA, Valor Collegiate at Centennial, Hillsboro at Franklin Road Academy. All those games are at 6 p.m. And finally, Cane Ridge is at Antioch at 7 p.m. Major League Baseball action, the Braves are at the Cubs. First pitch for that game is 6:40 p.m. You can find that game on FanDuel Sports Southeast. The Yankees are at the Astros at 7:10. You can find that game on the MLB Network. Minor League Baseball action, the Nashville Sounds are still up at Norfolk. First pitch for that game set for 5:35. In the WNBA, the Los Angeles Sparks are at the Atlanta Dream at 6:30. And finally, the Connecticut Sun are at the Chicago Sky at 7 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, those were your scores. That was your schedule, and that concludes today's rundown.
So Calvin's getting really good at that spiel at the end. So kudos to Calvin. Your top story brought to you by the fine folks down at Piggly Wiggly Neely's Mill in Columbia. They serve daily lunch from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. They also offer hand-cut meats, and everything is cost plus 10 at the cash register. Piggly Wiggly Neely's Mill. Presenting to you our top story. This was just something that I'm sure college football fans across the country we're looking forward to coming out yesterday afternoon, just prior, I guess, the tip off of our show on Tuesday with Wade and Calvin. That was the reveal of the AP Top 25 poll coming off the first weekend, a full weekend of college football on the season. We're going to dive into that really quickly. Obviously, there is a new number one in the world of college football, and that is the Ohio State Buckeyes, who hopped up a couple spots and unseeded Texas, the AP poll. They are followed by Penn State, LSU, Georgia, and Miami in the top 5. Obviously, LSU and Miami big wins over top 10 opponents this week. LSU going to Death Valley and I guess staking claim to their own Death Valley as who's the real Death Valley, and defeating Clemson on Saturday night, and obviously Miami picking up a big win over Notre Dame, who's in the national championship game last year, with a game-winning field goal with just over a minute left in Miami Gardens on Sunday night. So, Calvin, obviously we have a new top five, but the biggest mover, obviously, is Florida State going from unranked all the way to number 14 in the country, and obviously the slide of Alabama from going in the top 10 to the number 21 spot. I believe their lowest ranking in an AP poll since 2008. I believe that is correct. So obviously we have some some new players at the top, and obviously a reeling Alabama team that got put right in front of Tennessee, which will make some Tennessee fans happy this afternoon.
Yeah, Alabama dropped 13 spots from week 1 to the poll, or this week's poll. What was really not really surprising, but LSU jumped up 6 spots after going on the road, beating Clemson in Death Valley. Yeah, in Clemson's Death Valley, like you mentioned. But you know, Ohio State, is your new number 1 team. I'm surprised Texas slid that much, but those other teams in front of them did win. But I think the biggest thing for me is, like Texas dropped 6 spots, but Texas is still very much, one of those teams that can probably contend for best team in the country. I mean, how many times did Texas get stuffed on the goal line when they were 5 inches away from scoring? And, obviously, like you said, Miami, big win over Notre Dame. Carson Beck and the boys got it done. But, the preseason polls and, pretty much the poll up until halfway through the season, I'm not sure many people put stock into it, but it's a fun talking point like we're doing right now.
Yeah, feel free to leave this up for us, Mark, as we discuss. I look at this, Calvin, and I just think about, I guess what I've told some people as the resident Notre Dame fan of this show, and I'm going to stick up for Texas and Clemson as well. And you see that they are still ranked right together here in this top 10 of the poll, all lost by 1 scores. Texas and Notre Dame losing by 1 score on the road, Clemson losing by a couple scores at home. um, you can't penalize them per se for playing a hard team and a hard schedule in the opening week of their season. Better that having a close loss on your resume and actually playing somebody of note than playing a cupcake per se that some teams in this poll, I won't name names, some teams in this poll played Georgia, Penn State, Michigan, Oregon. So I'll just keep going. But and I think we look forward to matchups, right? You think about this week, game day is going to Norman, Oklahoma. We have Michigan, who's the number 15 in the country, obviously playing Oklahoma, a good matchup there. So got some ranked matchups. But I also look at the SEC, right? The SEC is well represented in this poll. You see LSU and Georgia in the top 5 at 3 and 4. You have Texas at number 7 and South Carolina at 10. Obviously, Florida with DJ Lagway at 13, Oklahoma Sooners at 18, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Alabama, Tennessee right there together. So the SEC is well represented, and the SEC had kind of a bummer of a week last week going into it. So I think LSU kind of saved the SEC's bacon per se. Alabama got steamrolled by the ACC in Florida State. Texas did not look good versus Ohio State offensively, obviously. So the ACC looked good. You think about Miami, you think about Clemson picking up big wins. So I guess that was kind of my takeaways. But Calvin, really quickly before we head off to a break, I think a lot of people would have argued that the new number 1 team in the country, Ohio State, should have been number 1 to begin with, considering they were your national champion from last year.
Yeah, the reigning national champion. Year in and year out, they just reload with talent. Brought Jeremiah Smith back, who's probably, I think a lot of people would agree, the best wide receiver in the country. They just win. And, Texas has been, the Texas revival has kind of been, it turned into something that nobody believed in a couple years ago. And now it's turned into a very real thing where Texas can probably contend for the playoff year. I'm not going to say year in and year out, but they've kind of got to the point where they're actually a respectable football program again, instead of getting all the preseason hype and then kind of flaming out and not doing anything in the postseason. But to drop 6 spots, after losing by 7 to the reigning national champion. I understand that the rest of the teams in front of them all won, but like you said earlier, I don't think you can penalize somebody for going on the road and losing by a score to the reigning national champion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking forward to seeing how obviously this is going to mix up and change as the weeks go. Obviously, as I mentioned, Oklahoma and Michigan doing battle this weekend. Another top 25 matchup on the horizon next week. That's the Texas A&M Aggies traveling to South Bend, Indiana, to take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So we're going to have some ebbs and flows, and we're going to discuss this obviously all the way into the final reveal of the college football playoff rankings. But just an interesting note. So the fans of Texas, Notre Dame, and Clemson can relax. You always wonder how far you are going to fall. And so no need to be alarmed or worried. You're still in the top 10 and obviously have a whole season and a lot of things to play for. So that'll do it for our top story. Coming up after the break, we'll be joined by our good friend Caleb JARREAU from East Tennessee with the Daily Times. We'll talk about Tennessee's big win as they are in the top 25, sitting at number 22. We'll talk about their big win down in the Benz in Atlanta over Syracuse. We'll talk Joey Aguilar and talk about their upcoming matchup against East Tennessee State this weekend in Neyland in their home opener. So stay with us here on Main Street Sports Today. We'll be right back.
Got closer. All new Sportsbook, the latest gaming machines, live horse racing, and more. The Mid Gaming Hall, Kentucky Downs.
Winning just got closer.
Deep in a forest at Nashville Zoo, new creatures here for you to view. Phantoms graced in black and white swing high in trees of dappled light. In rocky crags, tall and steep, small antelopes with nimble feet. A wise old man with beard of white, a sentry perched on stony height. Amidst it all, a hunter lies, with coat of gold and steely eyes. A new adventure just for you. Leopard Forest at Nashville Zoo. Open now.
Busy bee, yeah, busy bee. If you need...
Hold on, y'all, hold on. I need to make a call. Hey, this is Brianna with Busy Bee. I'm giving you a call to let you know your technician is on his way.
3-3.
Oh, busy bee. Guys, not yet. Not yet.
Busy bee, oh,
Now
busy
ready,
bee.
guys.
Call 775-7833.
Custom Stone Handlers supplies over 600 distributors and suppliers with quality stone products. Along with Riverstone, we produce and distribute over 100 building, landscape, and other bulk products. Our goal is to provide quality products, service, and partnerships to ensure our customers' success. We firmly believe the measure of any person or company is how you treat other people and customers. Give them a call at 931-490-4990 or visit CustomStoneHandlers.com.
Welcome back in this Wild and Wacky Wednesday here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. I'm David Wilson. Sorry, that is Calvin White coming to you from our respective homes here in the Mid-State, and we're happy to be joined by our good friend Caleb JARREAU from East Tennessee of the Daily Times. Talk a little Tennessee football after their big win last weekend in the Benz down in Atlanta against Syracuse. Caleb, thanks for joining us.
Hey, fellas, how are y'all?
Good.
Doing well. I have to ask you, you're on the high school football beat now on Friday night, which lingers into early Saturday mornings and covering Tennessee still. So I have to ask, although the Labor Day holiday weekend was Monday, how the sleep schedule is going. Calvin and I are still recovering, to say the least.
I was gonna make a joke when I came on here because I know y'all are both in the same boat. But yeah, I had CAK Heritage at CAK Friday night. Got a 3 hours of sleep maybe. Hit the road for Atlanta. Came back, caught the end of LSU and the Nico Iamaliava watch that everybody around these parts was interested in. But yeah, no, it has not recovered. Would be the short answer to the question. But I haven't helped myself with mixing in a little bit of PlayStation, and I always like to write at night as well. So I've never been an early morning person, but it does feel nice though, David, during, football season, because Tennessee practices in the morning. So my sleep schedule for like 3 weeks of fall camp is really, really good. And then, when the season starts, plus you mix in soccer and volleyball on the weeknights, it's tough to get back on track.
I'd say you're better than me so far. Covered a little volleyball so far, but the soccer has not made it to the docket yet. So I'll have to stop slacking per se and get on that horse. But as you mentioned, you made the trip down to Atlanta this past weekend and saw Tennessee take care of business per se against Syracuse. Joey Aguilar looked really good for the Vols. So just before we kind of dive his performance per se, where he was 16 of 28 passing for 247 and 3 scores. Obviously, Tennessee picking up the 45-26 win over the Orange. Just give me your general thoughts on Tennessee's performance. Obviously, there's a lot of questions going into an opener with no preseason, obviously, in college football, what teams can look like. Give me your overall thoughts on what you thought from the Vols.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with what we saw on Saturday. I had as many questions as anyone about the offense, particularly, I figured out, I think with Josh Heupel, you can kind of chalk up the quarterback position to get figured out. But a lot of my questions came with, what does that offensive line look like? Who's going to be catching the ball? Can the running back sustain the run game that we've seen out of Josh Heupel? And a lot of those got answered. I think the running backs will be perfectly fine. You've got 3 guys who showed great potential there, especially out of the pass game too, which is something Joey Halsley talked about they wanted to add, after last season, was mixing it up and getting those running backs in the pass game. So I think that was a pretty good development. And then you mix in that offensive line, even with Jesse Perry, who I think is a mid-state guy or maybe a Memphis guy, but he didn't pass block at all in high school. He played very, very small private school ball. So it was all run block, wing tee, pure wishbone offense. And he starts at right tackle and does great. Like, nobody's really talking about the offensive line because they didn't raise any questions. So I think that's good to see out of that group. And then, like you said, Joey Aguilar looked great for a first game. There's some high misses there, but obviously the 73-yard touchdown pass to Braylon Saley's got everybody excited. And, wide receivers have some room to grow. Tight ends look good. Offensively, I was impressed. Defense left some questions on the field that kind of concerned me. Depth at defensive tackle has become a big issue now with some injuries. Linebackers, I thought, played okay, but you would expect maybe a little bit better from a veteran group. And letting Syracuse do what they did, it's still a Power 5 opponent, and Fran Brown is a great coach and knows how to drop an offense. It's just still questionable that they were able to have that much success. So defense, I have questions. Offense, I was pleasantly surprised, especially with some of the new formations and new schemes we saw, screen passes, getting the running backs in the pass game, all of that. So overall, I'd say it's good coming out of game one, but I think you leave with a little bit, more questions on defense than you had going in.
Caleb, with Dylan Sampson gone, there were a lot of questions about Tennessee's running game coming into this year. But, this past week, I guess Syracuse, Star Thompson and Deshaun Bishop, both almost went for almost 100 yards. Is that a group where that's still kind of a competition, or is it kind of a 1A and 1B type thing where they're going to use both of them consistently?
Yeah, I think honestly with all 3 guys, it'll still be a rotation with Deshaun Bishop, Peyton Lewis, and Starr. But I thought, to your point, Calvin, that Starr was probably the best guy coming out of that game, in my eyes. He had that touchdown pass on the broken play where he kind of went for the jump ball. And coming into Tennessee, one of the things on him was that he was going to be a really good pass catcher out of the backfield. So that was good to see. But you mix that in, I think 12 attempts, 93 yards, all 3 running backs left with a touchdown. So I think you'll still see that three-headed mix there. And I think it just goes back to kind of 2022, 2023 Tennessee. We had Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, and a young Dylan Sampson. I think that's what this team would like to be, especially when you look at the tempo and how much these guys have to carry the ball and pass block and how much they're doing on the field. And last year, I think is probably going to be an anomaly with Dylan Sampson being kind of the bell cow guy. So I would say the 3-headed rotation will stick. You've got Carnes alum, Knoxville guy, Deshaun Bishop there. Not surprised to see he was the starter. He's kind of the oldest in the room that's earned it, but Star Thomas is probably older than Deshaun, but he wasn't in Tennessee system as much, obviously, with it coming in the transfer portal. So I was impressed with all three of those guys. And I think Peyton Lewis, honestly, will give this Tennessee team the most, I guess, potential long-term because, man, if you run some of those screen passes for Peyton Lewis and he gets loose, that kid can fly. He was a Virginia state champion for track. He's a kid that, is still kind of learning how to play running back. You notice every once in a while he runs through the hole super tall, and that'll get him hit a couple of times. But if he can get his pad level down and keep up with his potential, man, I think he's going to be big for Tennessee as well.
Caleb, I'm not going to pretend to be the biggest Tennessee fan per se, but I know one thing for sure is that Josh Heupel, at least in my book, got a lot of credit and a lot of praise for the way he handled, obviously, the Nico situation this offseason, not putting one person above the team. And, with the way that Joey Aguilar performed this weekend down in Atlanta compared to Nico's performance in UCLA, I think he kind of probably went with the right guy per se and just a guy that can fit the system and give this team what it needs. Obviously, he had a really good performance, and I think Coach Heupel will be the first to say, obviously, there's still some meat on the bone per se for what this offense can be. So overall, just kind of give me your thoughts on the first game for him in the system. A lot of room to grow, obviously, but your thoughts on Joey's performance against Syracuse offensively.
Yeah, maybe it's an overreaction coming out of the first game, but I do think, it looks like Joey is going to be a better fit for this offense than Nico was, just because he's not afraid to let it rip. And I think that's what this offense has been missing is, a guy who can really let the deep ball go and trust that he'll make the play and trust that he'll, throw guys open, I think is what Hendon Hooker was best at. We didn't see it a ton from Joey, but obviously those attributes are there. And for me, the big thing is Nico overthrew countless deep passes last year. Well, if you overthrow the deep ball, there's no chance anybody can do anything. With Joey, he had the perfect one to Braylon Staley, and then he had an underthrow as well that ended up in a defensive pass interference where if you overthrow that ball, you get nothing out of that play. But with an underthrow, you give the receiver a chance to work back to the ball. He can draw a pass interference. He can bat it down to save the potential pick, So I think you see a lot of veteran things out of Joey too. And one of the big things I saw as well is he's scanning through the field, which we didn't see much with Nico for one. And then two, he doesn't just tuck the ball and run. Like he doesn't give up on the play. I think the Star Thomas play is a perfect example where he felt pressure in the pocket. He felt it start to collapse. So he rolls out, but he's not rolling out to run. He's rolling out to try to draw a receiver open. You play Madden, try to playmaker a guy open and try to fit a ball in there and keep his eyes downfield. So you see a lot of veteran things out of him. And he's gained, the full trust of this coaching staff because I don't even think we saw with Nico some of the pass plays Joey ran in his first game. I mean, coming out of the gate and throwing the ball on first down was a sight that everybody loved to see. And I think this offense, truthfully, has a lot to gain with him. I think you need to get the tight ends more involved in the pass game. They did some good things, but Joey Halsley admitted, offensive coordinator, that they missed Ethan Davis on a couple plays. And you got to get some sure hands from these wide receivers because you still have drops. Like the Chris Brazzell slant, like if he catches that ball clean and makes one guy miss, he's in the end zone for 6. Or, Mike Matthews and some of those high throws, sure, they're high, but they're catchable balls. So I think if you get some sure-handed wide receivers and the wide receivers stay healthy, I mean, you've got a quarterback there who isn't afraid to dish out the ball and also let it eat and throw it deep. So I liked what I saw out of Joey Aguilar. I don't think it's surprising. And I think fans will be, pleasantly surprised when they look at his interception numbers at the end of the year because he's not going to have to play from behind as much. And these schemes, Heupel hasn't had a quarterback with high interception numbers during his time most years. So the scheme makes it really easy to look around and not get yourself into trouble with interceptions. So I think he'll be just fine. He showcased the legs as well. I think he'll have to slide in the SEC or he'll get his head taken off. But other than that, man, I think it's a lot of good from Joey Aguilar, and you just got to hope the pieces around him keep pulling their weight.
Caleb, you mentioned you still had some questions kind of surrounding Tennessee's defense. You mentioned depth at defensive tackle, but outside of that, what are you still trying to, find some answers to regarding Tennessee's defense?
Yeah, I wonder about what the DBs are going to look like now. Obviously, coming into the year, you hope you have Jermod McCoy and Ricky Gibson coming off of last season, who were arguably, the best 1-2 defensive back combination in the country. But now you look at it, Jermod McCoy, his timeline is unknown. He's still recovering from that torn ACL he got, I think, in January or December when he was training. And now you've got Ricky Gibson, who's out for an unforeseen, like nobody knows how long he's going to be out. So Now your cornerbacks look at Colton Hood, who's a transfer from Colorado that impressed in his first game. And on the other side of him, it's Ty Redmond, a 3-star freshman from Georgia. So the cornerbacks, all of a sudden, you got a lot of questions there. Depth at defensive tackle is going to be an issue. Nathan Robinson, man, he played really, really good, but he also left the game twice with injury, and something that's followed him his whole career has been injuries. So I think depth at defensive tackle is a big one, and hoping that you get Jackson Moy back sooner rather than later at that position to kind of man that. But that's somewhere you're going to be banged up a lot. Questions-wise, though, I think you have to find a way to get Edwin Spillman on the field more, because right now your linebacker spot, I mean, you got Jeremiah T-Lander and Arian Carter, who both are solid guys, strong leadership. But whenever you get Edwin Spillman out there, he was flying around like with his hair on fire and played really good football. So I think you got to find a way to get him involved a little more. He's a Tennessee guy from y'all's neck of the woods. And then you just look at, safeties, I think have been consistent, but that star position is one that's still questionable for me, because you're kind of on the fence right now with Boo Carter. So with Boo Carter, I think if he's going to be a part of the team and he's going to play, he needs to be your starting star. So that way you can move Jalen McMurray to cornerback, and that gives you more depth at that position with injuries. But if Boo Carter is not going to be your starting star, your nickelback on the defense, he's not going to return punts or kicks, I'm not really sure what he's there to do, because the best thing he brings for this team is punt returner, kick returner, and he's a serviceable guy at the nickelback that can give you options with Jalen McMurray and moving some other guys around. So I think it's still foreseen what's going to happen with Boo Carter, and that's something, I'd like to watch out for as well.
Caleb JARREAU of the Daily Times joining us here on Main Street Sports today as we talk a little Tennessee football. Caleb, I'm going to stick on the defensive side of the ball. That was really the strength of the team last year, was particularly that front seven that could get after the passer and stop the run on defense, obviously led by James Pierce, who was a first-round pick in the NFL draft. You mentioned the defense kind of being up and down per se last week against Syracuse, giving up 26 points to transfer quarterback Steve Angeli coming over from Notre Dame for the Big Orange. But defensively seems like they were also very opportunistic, to say the least. Obviously, 5 sacks on defense, the interception that you mentioned by T-Lander, and the fumble recovery, which was a scoop and score by Colton Hood. Do you think that this defense really, and obviously it's one game, so this is just you kind of bringing out your crystal ball, is going to be kind of a bend and don't break kind of team, or in an opportunistic defense where they're going to try to look to capitalize on those turnovers?
Yeah, and I think that's something you've seen with Tim Banks. I don't think bend but don't break is would be new if we saw that this year. But I think you saw him have to get a little bit more creative to get that pass rush. Tennessee had 5 sacks on Saturday, which is they didn't get 5 sacks at all last season. So you mentioned having James Pierce and some of those veterans, like those guys were really good, but they didn't hit that sack number. But I think what you saw is Tim Banks drawing up certain blitzes. I mean, one that comes to mind is Arian Carter just going through the middle of the line untouched. And then you had a DB blitz as well. And then Nathan Robinson got that back there for that strip sack, like you mentioned. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a mix. I think you're going to have to see a lot more coaching this year, a lot more scheming up guys, because I don't think that the 4 will reach the quarterback as much as they did last year. But I think you have a lot more tools where you can, draw up blitzes like Arian Carter coming up the middle and utilizing his speed, or guys like that to get that sack number higher. What worries me is I think, there's a lot of busted coverages that you really don't want to see against Steve Angeli and that Syracuse offense that lost a lot of pieces from last year. Jonte Cook is a great wide receiver, sure, but still there's some other things that I was kind of worried about coming out of that. And then you also look at like Boo Carter had an open sack opportunity against Steve Angeli and just whiffed. Like, is that a week 1 thing, or is that something for concern going down the season? I hope it's just a week 1 thing for Tennessee's sake, because Steve Angeli is a statue compared to what Riley Leonard was at Notre Dame. So yeah, I do have some questions. I think bend but don't break would be a good way to put it, because I do think as you get down to the red zone, some of those issues will correct themselves. I also wonder too how much of it was just new players playing together for the first time. So like a young guy missing a coverage that leaves a guy open, but everybody else was assignment sound. So I think that comes up as well. So yes and no. I think you'll have to see a lot more coaching this year and a lot more calls. Whereas last year, even if there was a bad play, you had James Pierce on the field, you have Jermon McCoy on the field, where if things are not going correct, those are, standout SEC athletes that can still get the play done. So I don't think you have that this year. So I think you're going to have to see a lot more of scheming to get sacks, scheming to get, pressure on the quarterback, and hopefully go from there. So I think you hit the nail on the head, though. I think bend but don't break would be a good way to put it. And to see the defense continue scoring, I think was big, because when you look at the scoreboard, like, the defense basically handed you 14 points. And we talk good about the offense all we want, but they were flat in the third quarter. So without that 14 points from the defense, that game might have looked a lot different.
Caleb, kind of looking at the drive chart, you mentioned the interception by the defense to start inside the red zone on one of the scoring drives. But outside of that, if you don't count the interception, 3 of the 5 touchdown drives were, they lasted about 3.5 minutes or less. That's something that obviously people have known about Josh Heupel's offense, is how explosive it is. But is the offense this year going to be as explosive to the success it has been the last couple of years, do you think?
Yeah, I think we'll probably fall somewhere in between, like based off of game 1. Obviously, it's a small sample size, but if I had to predict, I think it would be better than last year, but obviously probably not to that standard that you had with Hendon Hooker and the 2022 team. That was kind of the peak so far of Josh Heupel. I think that just makes sense to me, to where you still have a strong run game, and you've got a quarterback who's not afraid to throw it deep. So even if you're not, explosive can be a lot of things. We saw Deshaun Bishop rip off a 35-yard run. I would say that's explosive. I don't know if you'll have as many of the just wide open deep balls like you had that Tennessee really wants to have and get back to, like when Jalen Hyatt was on the field. But I think you will have Joey Aguilar cutting it deep and if they're not catching it, maybe drawing pass interference. I don't see this team getting behind the sticks a lot unless something, is drastically going wrong in the pass game. Because I still think this run game is such a good crutch that you can fall on. Because at the end of the day, even as novice as some of these running backs are, Deshaun Bishop's always going to fall forward. So unless your offensive line is just getting absolutely blown up, I think this offense will stay positive. And I think that's what really hurt this team last year, is Nico would take a sack, or Dylan Sampson would get hit in the backfield because you can't pass the ball, or Nico would throw a screen and get caught and a loss for 3. And that's when Heupel's offense really starts to sputter, is when you're behind the chains, you're going backwards, and the tempo can't operate. But we saw tempo on Saturday, and it was probably the quickest tempo we've seen in a very long time from this offense. And Joey Halzle mentioned, during his Tuesday press conference this week, that this year they're kind of treating tempo as like a tool that they have. But if for some reason the offense isn't working, they're not just going to run tempo just to run it. So I think that's kind of a change of approach from what you've seen recently, to where they're going to use tempo to their advantage, but not necessarily say, hey, we have to run tempo. That's what this offense is. That's the only way we can succeed. So we've already seen more wrinkles added to the playbook in game 1. I don't think we'll see a lot against ETSU this weekend, but it makes you excited for SEC play to know that they have, some of those extra screens in the game, some better ways to get the running backs the ball, knowing the talent you have in the backfield. And all in all, just taking stress off of Joey Aguilar and making it really as easy as possible for him to operate. So I think it will be more explosive probably than last year, but I don't think you'll ever hit that 2022 rate until, you have a fluid off season and Josh Heupel gets his guys in the system. But as long as you're staying ahead of the chains and moving forward, this offense, under Heupel with his, the way he likes to play football, as long as you're moving forward, this offense should run.
Tennessee will transition into its home opener this weekend up in Neyland Stadium on Saturday at 3:30 Eastern Time against ETSU. As Caleb mentioned, that one can be found on ESPN Plus and the SEC Network Plus. And Caleb, going into this matchup, obviously Tennessee is a heavy favorite on its home opener. So I'm going to ask you a question this way: how do you quantify success, or some things that you're looking for Tennessee to accomplish to come out with a positive week? Obviously with the victory, but just some things that you're looking for. Maybe seeing Merklinger or George McIntyre in the matchup. Some things that you're looking for Tennessee to be coined to say we had a successful Saturday and got some guys in that we wanted to see.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about getting guys in that you want to look at and see what you have, on your back end. I think Tennessee has depth. They have a lot of bodies, but you really don't know what you have in that second, third string in a game setting. So I think you need to get those guys in the game. And more so than just seeing what you have, get those guys in front of 100,000 people, have them run through the tee, have them go through everything. So that way you get your nerves out this Saturday against ETSU, because when Georgia comes to town in 2 weeks, there's no time for getting nerves out or learning on the fly, because that's when the bullets really start flying and everything matters. So I think getting young guys in the game, taking care of business. I mean, I remember when Joe Milton, I think it was Austin Peay that he was struggling with in Neyland Stadium. Some of those cupcake games, you're supposed to score 50, 60 points on ETSU. So go out and score 50 and 60 points and make it not a game and take care of business. And truthfully, I mean, they offer a good test for Tennessee. You've got 2 quarterbacks, very kind of weird system they're running. They got Jacoby Criswell, who's a former Power 4 guy who got to ETSU and he was like 250 pounds. So he's lost some weight, and he's a guy that'll run. Then you mix up him with Cade McNamara, who everybody remembers as another Power 5 guy. So they're going to have talent at the quarterback position that knows what it's like to play against these big-time teams like Tennessee. So I don't think ETSU will be able to compete. I shouldn't say it like that, but I think the defense still in your first few drives when your starters are in should have a good test of, hey, we can't just run through everybody for ETSU and just hit the quarterback. Like, he's going to know his reads. He's going to be smart with the ball. So I think you've got that going for you to where, while it's an FCS opponent that's not, or a SoCon opponent that's not going to be, a strong points scorer, like, you're not going to look at the end of the day and the final score be close. But I think you still get some good things out of having a veteran quarterback back there, whoever is playing quarterback for ETSU. So big thing for me, though, is I want to see the young guys get in the game. George McIntyre, Jake Merklinger would be good to get in, but also a lot of the freshmen. And I wouldn't expect, honestly, for Tennessee to rest some guys as well. Like, Jackson Moy could probably go this week, I would bet, if it was an SEC opponent, but I would doubt he plays against ETSU, or Heupel said he won't play against ETSU. So I think the big thing is just resting guys who need rest after that opener, getting ready for Georgia, and using it as a tune-up to get some of your freshmen in front of fans and hitting against another team.
Yeah, I have to ask you really quickly, Caleb, before we let you go. Give me the temperature on Rocky Top. The AP poll came out yesterday, and we see that Tennessee is slotted just behind one Alabama Crimson Tide. So give me the temperature of Rocky Top and the fans when they saw the poll and that Alabama is put right above them after their performance in Tallahassee.
Yeah, David, I don't think there's a Tennessee fan that was sad to see Alabama lose to Florida State, but I know several who were mad at the AP poll. But hey, if it's not, the first week of September, if you're not complaining about AP poll rankings and coaches poll rankings and saying the poll is corrupt and they got to take everybody's votes away. So, it's football season and there's games still being played, but man, you can't beat, there's not another sport where the Associated Press releases a top 25 and you would think, Josh Heupel was fired when you open your Twitter and see how people are reacting. So I think you hit the nail on the head, but I don't think rankings will change much after this week, but in 2 weeks, all those fans will really get to, put their money where their mouth is and see where Tennessee will rank up when Georgia comes to town.
There it is. That is Caleb JARREAU of the Daily Times. You can follow him on X at Caleb JARREAU16. Caleb, we appreciate you taking some time out of your Wednesday to talk a little Tennessee football with us.
I appreciate y'all. Have fun with another weekend full of high school football and college football.
Appreciate you. That is Caleb JARREAU of the Daily Times, kind enough to join us here on a Wild and Wacky Wednesday on Main Street Sports Today. Coming up after the break, we'll dive into the Braves and some MLB news and notes. The Braves took another loss. Their second straight on the north side of Chicago against the Cubs last night. We'll dive into that. The latest on some claims that they've made and some promotions they've made to their big league roster. And talk some news and notes across the Major League Baseball world right after this. So stay with us on Main Street Sports Today.
Columbia Power and Water Systems is dedicated to bringing our customers reliable, local service. Whether you're turning on a light switch, your faucet, or streaming on TV, our dedicated team members from here in Murray County work every day to keep you on. If you need us, call us 931-388-4833 or visit cpws.com. CPWS, local service, local support.
Zion Christian Academy at zioneagles.org or 931-388-7531. You can schedule your appointment to visit their beautiful campus. Again, zioneagles.org or 931-7531 to schedule your visit today.
This day in Braves history, September 3rd, 1957, Milwaukee Braves ace Warren Spahn tossed a six-hitter and blanked the Chicago Cubs 8-0 to set a new National League record for shutouts by a southpaw. It was the Hall of Famer's 41st career shutout, breaking the record previously held by Larry French of the Pirates and the Cubs. He did that in front of 7,490 fans at Wrigley Field on the north side of Chicago. That was today's date in Braves history, September 3rd, 1957. Warren Spahn. Um, Braves were also on the north side of Chicago last night, where they faced the Cubs and they fell to the Cubbies 4-3. Cubs picked up their 80th win of the season. The Braves dropped to 62-77 on their season that continues to head towards its final stretch here in September. I mentioned in the rundown, Kyle Tucker hit a 3-run home run off Joey Wentz in the first inning. He also left that game later with calf tightness. We'll get another news and a note on that later in this segment. Shota Imanaga got the start for the Cubs last night. Pitched really well, 6 innings pitched, 5 hits, 3 runs. So another loss for the Braves, Calvin, on a Tuesday that we have to discuss on a Wednesday.
Yeah. Another one of these one-run losses. The season's been down the drain for the last 2 or 3 months, but it would be nice just once in a while to get on here on Wednesday and talk about a win. But at this point in the year, they can't even give us that. The most notable thing that happened with the game yesterday is Ha-Sung Kim made his Braves debut. But outside of that, not many exciting things to talk about with the Braves over the last couple months outside of how good Michael Harris has been since the All-Star break.
Yeah, both the Braves, I guess, of the 3 Braves runs, they all came by via the home run. Ozzie Albies hitting right-handed off of Imanaga, hit a 2-run home run, and Eli White also hit a solo shot in this one. Calvin mentioned Ha-Sung Kim making his debut for the Braves. He went 2 for 4 batting in the 6th spot and playing shortstop. Of note for the Braves, obviously, they claimed him off waivers from the Tampa Bay Rays, who signed him this offseason. The Braves will pay Kim $2 million for the rest of this season in 2025. And, he has a player option that can be picked up for next year for $16 million in 2026. He had been on the IL since August 21st with lower back inflammation. So, obviously, this shortstop was a position of need for the Braves. Obviously, Nick Allen, a great defensive shortstop, Gold Glove worthy-esque, but leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to offensively production. The Braves have received a major league worst 525 OPS from the shortstop position. That combined with Nick Allen and Orlando Arcia, who was released in May. So hopefully Ha-Sung Kim, who's shown really some flashes of being a really good hitter up in San Diego, can kind of settle that shortstop position and give the Braves something they're looking for. Obviously, a guy who can hit for a little bit of better average per se than Nick Allen, also has the ability to run and also can play some Gold Glove defense. So the Braves trying to find anything from that shortstop position. Obviously, Bo Bichette, with the performance that he's had this season up in Toronto, has probably priced himself out of the Braves' price range per se when it comes to free agency. So the Braves taking a shot with Ha-Sung Kim, who once again has a $16 million player option, not club option, player. So it'll be up to Kim whether he opts into that for next season. Another note that Braves fans have been, looking for, and it happened last night, was the promotion of Hayden Harris, the lefty from Georgia Southern, who's had a really good season in the bullpen in the minor leagues for the Braves. Across 2 levels this season, he had gone 6-0 with a .56 ERA, struck out 73 batters in 48 innings, also pitched in the MLB Futures game during the All-Star break in Atlanta. He made his major league debut last night for the Braves and tossed 1 scoreless inning, perfect inning, no runs across. Also, Roldy Munoz got called up from the Braves, hard-throwing bullpen arm, sitting 97 and 99 with some sinkers, tossed 2 scoreless innings yesterday in relief. So the Braves, with a season like this, it's good to have some guys maybe that can give hope you want to see some young guys get the opportunity to play. We've seen that with Hurston Waldrop in the starting rotation. So hopefully Hayden Harris and Rolly Munoz can take advantage of their opportunity in the bullpen and carve out roles potentially for the 2026 roster. The Braves will look to avoid the sweep tonight in Chicago. That is a 6:40 Central Time first pitch. It'll be right-hander Bryce Elder for the Braves, who is 5-9 on the season with a 5.85 ERA, taking on Rookie of the Year contender Cade Horton for the Cubs. He is 9-4 on the season with a 2.92 ERA. 6:40 first pitch once again from Wrigley Field. Last night, Wade's Astros dropped a matchup, the first of a series with the New York Yankees. Yankees 7-1 victors over the Astros. Jazz Chisholm hit 2 home runs in that matchup, and Trent Grisham Jr. hit a grand slam in that one. The Yankees are now 77-61 on the season. They were boosted by a quality start by Max Fried, and the Astros dropped to 76-63 on its season. Framber Valdez taking the loss in that one. Game 2 tonight from Houston will be at 7:10. That is a Central Time first pitch. It'll be right-hander Will Warren for the Yanks, who is 8-6 on the season with a 4.30 ERA, taking on Jason Alexander of the Astros. He is 4-1 with a 4.61 ERA. Calvin, last night in Coors Field, things got rocky. Did you perchance see the benches clearing brawl between the Giants and Rockies last night? To set the scene for you really quickly, it was Kyle Freeland pitching for the Rockies, gives up a monster home run to Rafael Devers. He takes note of Rafael maybe sitting and admiring, and by time Rafi gets to first base, here come the benches, and I don't believe Rafi ever rounded the bases and touched home plate. He just immediately went and jumped into the brawl. So things getting feisty between two NL West rivals. Go ahead and play the video, Mark. In Coors.
And they'll be above
Video
500. They're
watching,
5
Calvin,
games
give me
out
your thoughts.
of the final wild card spot. Devers skies one to right. And gone. Another one for Rafi Devers.
And there it is. It's
And
on
Kyle
like
Freeland
popcorn,
in
as
the
they would
benches
say.
for clearing. Devers was trying to round
And here
the
they come.
bases.
So
Freeland was unhappy, and now we got punches.
once
being
again, I don't think
thrown.
Rafi ever. There he is jumping in the pile.
Hey,
Ever
Devers still hasn't
rounded the
rounded
bases and scored,
bases.
Calvin. So little heated
he's in the
moment
mix.
here
He left
between
the
the
base paths.
Rockies
This
and
is
the
now
Giants that
pushing out
led to
towards
some
second
ejections as
base.
well.
Oh man, even Logan Webb is out there.
Yeah, there's a reason this team has lost 100 games on the third day of September. At the start of the year, we were talking about how there would be a chance for them to eclipse what the White Sox did last year and become the losingest team in a single season in the history of Major League Baseball. But if you groove meatballs down the middle to hitters as good as Rafael Devers, you're not going to win very many games. And I'm always in the camp of if you're going to get mad about it, then don't throw a beach ball down the middle to the guy. Now, Rafael Devers probably, escalated it a little bit by, yelling back at Kyle Freeland after Freeland took exception to it. But, the guy hit a home run. If I hit one 5 million feet in Coors Field, I would watch it too. But, Rocky's 39-100 right now. So I would imagine the only thing that the Rockies have to be mad about right now is how they've played this whole season.
Yeah, I can understand it from both ways. As the pitcher or the defensive player, I definitely don't want you to show up my pitcher. As an offensive player, though, if I hit one very far, I might have the right to admire it a second or two. Just kind of that old school versus new school kind of baseball. Back in the day, the next batter is eating one in the ribs or in the back. As you kind of mentioned, this is just a culmination of a rough season for both teams, really. I know the Giants were trying to put themselves in the playoff mix. They acquire Rafi Devers early in the season from the Red Sox. Obviously, their season has not panned out the way they wanted to, sitting behind the Padres and the Dodgers and then West, and obviously the Rockies as well. Hard to spend on a team pitching wise that plays in Coors Field. So they have, as you mentioned, crossed the 100 loss plateau, and that will continue with several weeks to go in the season. We're going to stay in the NL West, Calvin. We're going to switch over to the East Coast, though. And it was Shohei Ohtani last night, who made some history against the Pirates for the Dodgers, hit a solo home run off of Pirates prospect Bubba Chandler that went 120 miles per hour off the bat, his second hardest home run. The second hardest home run of the season in Major League Baseball. And Otani's 46th of the season was also his 100th career home run as a Los Angeles Dodger in just his 2 years. They lost last night to the Pirates 9-7, but already playing his 294th game with the Dodgers, Calvin, he is the fastest to reach 100 home runs in team history. Gary Sheffield did it in 399 career games. For Ohtani, it took 294. So he slugs, one of the most prolific hitters in the game, continuing to do what he does.
There is only one player in the history of Major League Baseball that's won more than 4 MVPs, and Shohei Ohtani is about to win his 4th in 5 years. He's just a stupid – it's stupid how good that guy is. And if he ever gets back to – he was never an elite pitcher, but he was still a pretty good pitcher. If he ever gets back to that top-tier level of pitching that he was at his first couple seasons with the Angels, and now obviously that's probably going to require him to sacrifice some of his offensive game. Like when he was DHing all of last season, we saw him steal 50 bases or whatever he ended up stealing. But we've just never seen anything like him, outside of Babe Ruth. And, there's probably a small percentage of people still left on the planet that actually saw Babe Ruth play. We're seeing somebody that's, if he continues down this path, he's already one of the best players ever. But by the time his career's over, if he keeps this up, we could be talking about the guy that's the best player in the history of Major League Baseball.
I agree with you there. Just obviously, him playing in Dodger blue and playing for one of the bigger brands in Major League Baseball only is going to boost his aura and his stock. So, from one historic player to a historic first couple games of a career, and we're going to transition to the New York Mets and right-handed pitcher Nolan McLean, who pitched and dazzled once again last night up in Detroit against the Tigers. The rookie right-hander for the Mets is the first Mets pitcher to go 4-0 in his first career starts. And obviously, he's joined some elite company with the way that he's performed and pitched to start his career. Just reading a note from my phone here. Nolan is the second MLB pitcher to go 4-0 with a sub 1.5 ERA and 25 plus strikeouts in his first career starts since ERA became official in both leagues back in 1913. The only other pitcher in his first 4 starts to have a 1.5 ERA or less and 25 more strikeouts was Fernando Valenzuela for the Dodgers back in 1981. So anytime you can join elite company with Fernando Valenzuela, you're doing something to start your MLB career, Calvin.
Yeah, this was kind of surprising. I would have assumed that Doc Gooden would have started 4-0 with the Mets with that stellar start to his career that he had. But you can never have enough pitching, and so like we mentioned with the Braves prospects a minute ago, if you can get these guys developed that aren't necessarily going to play a whole lot this year, but you're looking at guys that could potentially be part of your future. If you can get those guys action whenever you can, that's really good for a franchise. And a very small sample size, but it looks like the Mets might have another pretty good pitcher on their roster.
Absolutely. Really quickly here before we transition into our next break, some injury news here across Major League Baseball and some unfortunate news for the Arizona Diamondbacks, where they had to place left fielder Lourdes Gurriel Jr. On the 10-day injured list. It's going to be longer than that, obviously, with a torn right ACL. He suffered that in a 7-5 loss to the Texas Rangers. He was hurt in the 6th inning after he awkwardly jumped out of the way to avoid center fielder Blaze Alexander, who was making a diving catch on a line drive hit by Rowdy Tellez. So unfortunate lose for the Dodgers, who lose one of the better characters in Major League Baseball to an ACL injury. And also mentioned earlier when we broke down the Braves loss to the Cubs, Kyle Tucker, who injured his calf after hitting a home run in that matchup for the Cubs. Craig Counsell has also already admitted that he will likely be out of tonight's matchup as they close the series with the Braves with that calf injury. Obviously, the Cubs trying to get Kyle Tucker healthy as they make here the stretch run and try to head into the postseason. Still trying to chase down the Milwaukee Brewers, who have the best record in the National League. Last note here, just some minor league baseball notes. We mentioned in the rundown that the Sounds began their 6-game series up in Norfolk against the Tide, and they won last night in extra innings 4-3. Rehabber Reese Hoskins and Raynel Delgado had RBI knocks in that one for the Sounds, who got a good start from Tucker Davidson in that matchup as they take game 1 of the series, and we'll look to take game number 2 tonight up in Norfolk. That'll conclude here our MLB chatter segment here on Main Street Sports Today. Coming up after the break, we'll dive into the latest edition of the Grab Bag. We'll talk some news and notes across the world of the NFL, U.S. Open, and all that good stuff as well. So stay with us here on Main Street Sports Today as we enter our second hour.
Jones & Lang Sporting Goods here in Columbia has been outfitting teams, officials, and anybody else from T-ball to college for 50-plus years. Be sure and check them out at 931-388-8060 or online at jonesandlang.com. Jones & Lang Sporting Goods, the look of a winner.
Zion Christian Academy at zioneagles.org or 931-388-7531. You can schedule your appointment to visit their beautiful campus. Again, zioneagles.org or 931-7531 to schedule your visit today.
Is your internet slowing you down? It's time for an upgrade. Whether you're at home, working from your home office, or at your business, it's time to unleash the speed you need with speeds up to 1 gig at CPWS for as low as $70 a month. Give us a call, 931-375-7777. Local service, local support, CPWS.
Piggly Wiggly, located in Neely's Mill Shopping Center, is Columbia's locally owned and operated Cost Plus 10 grocery store dedicated to serving the community with low prices and smiling faces. Piggly Wiggly offers fresh, hand-cut meats daily as well as daily hot plate lunches from their deli counter. You're certain to see smiling faces and a helping hand when you're here at Piggly Wiggly. Come by and check out our fresh produce, high-quality meats, and more. Down home, down the street, we'll see you at the Pig.
Welcome back in. It is Wild and Wacky Wednesday here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. I'm David Wilson. That is Calvin White. It's time to dive into the latest edition of the Grab Bag as we talk some news and notes both locally and nationally across the world of sports. We'll start up in Green Bay. Obviously, the Packers made some big news last week as they acquired former Dallas Cowboy Micah Parsons and signed him to a lengthy new deal. Obviously, they traded 2 first-round picks for him and also traded Kenny Clark to the Cowboys. He is going to try to give it a go this week as the Packers open up their season up at Lambeau in the prime slot on CBS at 3:25 versus the defending NFC North champion Detroit Lions. It has been revealed, though, that, we always thought, or we thought per se, that Micah was not dealing with an injury. Back was listed on the injury report when he was with Dallas. Well, he has been dealing with a back injury, and according to Rob Demovsky of ESPN, he is dealing with an L4 and L5 facet joint sprain in his back and may need to receive an injection before Sunday's game in order to help him play. Before trading for the Parsons last week, the Cowboys prescribed him a 5-day course of predestinine, I guess that is. Yeah, I guess that's how you pronounce it. Excuse me, I'm not a doctor, which is an anti-inflammatory to help him recover from back tightness. They also had him on a physical therapy program. Parsons did practice on Monday for the first time with the Packers, and he did practice again today in pads as they continue to ramp up, as I mentioned, for their home opener on Sunday at Lambeau. He signed a new deal with the Green Bay last week for 4 years at $188 million with 120 fully guaranteed. So Calvin, at least for me, I thought the back was for a holdout reason for more money. Well, Micah Parsons is dealing with a back issue that could linger him going into Sunday's season opener.
Yeah, you never want to trade for a guy like this and then him not be able to play, but you also don't want to, play him if this is something minor that could potentially turn into something major. Obviously, the Packers are, trying to get back to that playoff success that they got so used to under Aaron Rodgers. Michael Parsons has been a limited participant in practice over the last couple of days. They're still not sure if he's going to play this week. But, obviously, if you're the Packers, you want him out there on the field. But part of me also is kind of curious whether this was a Jerry Jones fleece job where he knew that something was secretly wrong with Micah Parsons' back, and he was adamant that the Cowboys weren't gonna trade Micah Parsons, and that deal ends up going through. But that would be a little interesting if Jerry knew that something was wrong with Micah Parsons' back, and he basically just said, "Here, take him."
Well, one thing for sure is the Cowboys fans have not given him any slack for trading said face of defensive franchise, Micah Parsons, and trading him within the conference, the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, I think one of the other notes I would mention, Calvin, is a back. No matter the sport, is nothing to play with. The back, obviously, so central to what we do and how we operate. So hopefully Micah Parsons can get that sorted out. Obviously, one of the premier defensive players up in the game on the defensive line. From that outside linebacker position. Obviously, we think of Myles Garrett and T.J. Watt, Trey Hendrickson, etc. Micah Parsons is in that list of game wreckers that can just absolutely cause havoc for an offense. Kicking down a level for football to the college ranks. And, these two, maybe we should have let them duke it out at midfield after Saturday's game in Death Valley between LSU and Clemson. Well, Dabo and Brian Kelly are at it again. And they were feuding a little bit in the media after LSU's victory over Clemson in Death Valley that vaulted them up to number 3 in the AP poll. When asked just I think on Monday or Tuesday, excuse me, one of those days of the game, in his press conference, Dabo Swinney said it was a hell of a game, which came down to the last play. Right out of the gate, it's like getting the final exam on day one of class. They made a 65. We made it 58. Neither one of us were great. Well, Brian Kelly for LSU took opposition to that statement, and he said, I thought we dominated them in the second half. So he's really a really good grader for himself, giving them a 58, or he's a really hard grader on us, Kelly said in his news conference when asked about Swinney's comment. So he also continued and said, or he didn't see the second half, which that might be the case. He may not have wanted to see the second half. So these two, obviously very polarizing figures in the college football landscape. I don't know how many people love Dabo or hate him, or same with Brian Kelly, how many love him versus how many hate him, but they are definitely polarizing figures. So they're going at it in the media.
Yeah, everybody always talks about how they don't care. I mean, the coaches probably care more than anybody, but fans and players, most of the time they don't care what it looks like as long as they win the game. But 65 is better than 58. So if Clemson, if LSU was good enough to pull out a 65, I'm never going to discount winning a top 10 game on the road. I'm surprised Brian Kelly saw the second half after he got trucked on the sideline. But
Fair
top
statement.
10 win. Yeah, top 10 win on the road for LSU. It's the first time they've won the season opener in a couple of years, I believe.
Yeah.
But Clemson's going to be fine. They were preseason top 10 for a reason. 99% of the time you don't get that spot for no reason. Dabo's a multiple-time national champion. Um, but always fun to see coaches go at each other, especially when most of the time the coaches just try to deflect that stuff. So it's cool uh, every now and then to see coaches get fired up and react to that type of stuff.
Yeah, and I mentioned it last week on Main Street Sports Today, whether it was with Mo on Thursday or with you on last Wednesday. One of these teams is going to walk out with an extra confidence and swagger just because we have two programs that have not known to get off to great starts to start their season. Obviously, you mentioned LSU's recent woes. They lost 2 years in a row, and I believe to Florida State. They lose their season opener last year, excuse me, as well. So they've had some issues getting off to good starts. Well, LSU now has, gotten off to a good start, and now the job is to carry that momentum moving forward. I know a lot of people are circling their soon-to-be date with Florida as a matchup to keep an eye on for both sides, and obviously Clemson looking to rebound from its loss at home. Obviously with an ACC that looks improved with Florida State in there as well, and obviously Miami who picked up a big win over Notre Dame on Sunday night. So both two programs that we'll keep an eye on. Obviously, two programs that are in the top 10 rankings. Seem like really two good teams, Calvin. Obviously, Kate Klubnik is going to be one of the first quarterbacks taken in next year's NFL draft, and obviously Garrett Nussmeier showed a lot of poise for LSU. He might be the first quarterback taken in the NFL draft. He showed a lot of poise and a lot of weapons, and that LSU defense looked better. So two teams that we'll definitely keep an eye on moving forward in the world of college football. Going back to New York and going to Queens, the U.S. Open continued last night on primetime on ESPN, and it was Novak Djokovic defeating the United States Taylor Fritz to advance to the semifinals of the U.S. Open. He will take on Carlos Alcaraz. Djokovic, entered with a 10-0 record against Fritz and continued that statement moving forward, winning three sets and dropping just one to move on to face Spain's Carlos Alcaraz, which provide a great matchup on Friday in the semifinal round. So, Calvin, I don't know if you have been watching the U.S. Open. I'm disappointed that Coco Gauff has bowed out of the ladies tournament. But U.S. Open is obviously one of the premier majors when it comes to the tennis world. And it seems like Djokovic, as he continues to get older, obviously, he's still one of the best in the world at what he does.
Yeah, I'm not a huge tennis fan, but, even I know that Novak Djokovic is one of the best not only male tennis players, but tennis players in general of all time. He came in with a 10-0 record against Fritz. But he's 38 years old. We talked about it with Venus Williams last week. Obviously, Novak Djokovic is, he didn't take as long of a break from the game like Venus Williams did. Novak Djokovic has always played at a high level, but anytime you can watch some of the all-time greats still be productive at a high level later into their careers and as they get up in age, it's really cool to watch.
Moving forward, it's been a while since we dabbled in the world of the NBA. Obviously, their offseason is still going on as we head up until October, where their season will tip off. But this came from Pablo Torre, finds out, who does some really good work investigating. And this is coming from Yahoo Sports, and it says the Los Angeles Clippers and owner Steve Ballmer are being accused of paying star Kawhi Leonard $28 million for a no-show job as a way to circumvent the NBA's salary cap, according to Torre. He laid it out on his program on Wednesday. The show features direct quotes from legal documents, which made the argument that Leonard was paid about $28 million through a company owned by Ballmer to essentially do nothing. Ballmer is accused of using the agreement as a way to pay Leonard more than his contract, which, if true, is a violation of NBA rules. The entire situation revolves around a now bankrupt company called Aspiration, a tree planting service funded by Ballmer. Aspiration entered a $28 million legal agreement with KL2 Aspire LLC, a company owned by Kawhi Leonard. So Torre attempted to find any evidence that Leonard ever marketed for or endorsed the company, but came up empty. A clause in one of the contract documents between Aspiration and KL2 stated Leonard could decline to proceed with any action um, desired by the company, essentially giving Leonard the ability to get paid without doing anything. Another clause stated Leonard would only be paid if he remained a member of the Clippers. So, Calvin, I couldn't imagine getting paid $28 million not to show up to work. So, if somebody gave me that offer, hint, hint, I would gladly not show up if you're going to pay me 28 mil.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine doing anything and getting paid $28 million. I'll definitely do nothing for $28 million. But kind of looking at this, Kawhi Leonard's one of those guys that if he has a career where he never gets hurt and never misses so many games, we're probably looking at. He already is, but we're probably looking at one of the top 20, 30 best basketball players of all time. And on top of his contract, $28 million is a lot of extra money to play a guy that hasn't played a whole lot over the last couple of seasons. When they kind of put that core together out there with the Clippers with Kawhi and Paul George, when James Harden was there for a little bit, or James Harden is still there. But when they kind of put that core together, that was the goal, to finally get the Clippers over the hump and win a championship after all those years with Chris Paul and Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. Came up short in the playoffs year after year, but that's just a lot of extra money to pay a guy that doesn't play a whole lot. And I saw it flash across the top of my screen a couple minutes ago. The NBA says they are now investigating this. So I guess on a future episode of Main Street Sports Today, we will give the people an update on this Kawhi Leonard situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving forward here with some local news here, dipping right back in to the world of college football, and here locally with the Vanderbilt University and the Commodore. Vanderbilt's Langston Patterson and Issa Qatar are leading a class action lawsuit against the NCAA over its redshirt eligibility rule. They filed a class action lawsuit against the NCAA with several other former athletes, and to potentially pave a way for all players to play in all 5 years of the eligibility. Former Hawaii quarterback Braden Shanger is also among the players leading the lawsuit. The NCAA permits athletes 5 years of eligibility, but restricts them to playing in just 4, as one of the 5 years is reserved for the utilization of a redshirt season. The lawsuit accuses the NCAA of violating antitrust laws through the implementation of its redshirt rule, arguing that the requirement to sit out of one of the 5 years limits athletes' ability to earn NIL income. So, Calvin, it seems like college more than ever are trying to take advantage of these rules, and it seems like some want to stay in college football forever. I saw where TJ Finley has transferred again. Is still trying to use his eligibility, but I guess this is another step forward of athletes trying to take advantage of the rules as possible and play and have that much as ability as they can.
Yeah, and I can't really say that to a point I blame them for wanting to stay in college as long as they can, to kind of build their money. If there's some guys that, they kind of know and are self-aware that they're not going to be a high draft pick or maybe even play professionally at all. But we already see it a little bit with guys that have multiple red shirts and NIL keeping guys around. If you have 5 years of eligibility, not including the red shirt, if you have 5 years of playing eligibility, I can't imagine what it would look like if you got a team that was full of like 23 or 24-year-olds. And obviously this is more geared toward football, but if you've got a team that's full of a bunch of guys that are 22, 23, 24 years old, and then there's one of those teams that, is on the younger side, I would imagine that they would just get absolutely dominated. Obviously that theory is kind of geared more toward the other sports like basketball and stuff like that. If you put 5 dudes on a basketball court that are 22 and 23 years old against a bunch of 18-year-olds, they would get slaughtered more than likely. So it'll be interesting to kind of keep an eye on this. and see what comes of this. And we already see a couple. We've seen a couple guys over the last couple of years that have played 6, 7, 8 years of college football. But I imagine that number would likely go up if this were to pass.
Yeah, good stuff there as we dive into the latest edition of the Grab Bag. Moving forward after this break here on Main Street Sports Today, as we continue with a Wild and Wacky Wednesday, we'll continue with Calvin's favorite segment of the show. We'll jump into our weekly segment with Heather Williams from East Tennessee. As we talk a little NASCAR, as the NASCAR Cup Series started its playoff schedule last week up in Darlington Raceway in South Carolina. It was a dominant performance by Chase Briscoe as he captured the checkered flag in the Southern 500 for the second consecutive season and punched his ticket to the round of 12. Looking forward to talking to Heather on her weekly visit right after this commercial break here on Main Street Sports Today, so stay with us.
Deep in a forest at Nashville Zoo, new creatures here for you to view. Phantoms graced in black and white swing high in trees of dappled light. In rocky crags, tall and steep, small antelopes with nimble feet. A wise old man with beard of white, a sentry perched on stony height. Amidst it all, a hunter lies, with coat of gold and steely eyes. A new adventure just for you. Leopard Forest at Nashville Zoo. Open now.
Jones & Lang Sporting Goods here in Columbia has been outfitting teams, officials, and anybody else from T-ball to college for 50-plus years. Be sure and check them out at 931-388-8060 or online at jonesandlang.com. Jones & Lang Sporting Goods, the look of a winner.
Piggly Wiggly, located in Neely's Mill Shopping Center, is Columbia's locally owned and operated Cost Plus 10 grocery store dedicated to serving the community with low prices and smiling faces. Piggly Wiggly offers fresh, hand-cut meats daily, as well as daily hot plate lunches from their deli counter. You're certain to see smiling faces and a helping hand when you're here at Piggly Wiggly. Come by and check out our fresh produce, high-quality meats, and more. Down home, down the street, we'll see you at the Pig.
Welcome back in. It is Wild and Wacky Wednesday here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. I'm David Wilson. That is Calvin White. We're pleased to be joined now by Heather Williams, coming to us from the east side of Tennessee, up in the Tri-Cities area. Heather's looking good as always, as she's ready to dive into the NASCAR playoff schedule. Heather, how you doing?
Doing well, guys. How about you guys?
Good.
Doing well. Trying to survive the high school football season. I know the college season is upon us, and obviously the NASCAR Cup Series playoff schedule is also upon you as well. So we're all a little busy. Heather, obviously this past weekend in Darlington, an absolute dominant performance for Chase Briscoe as he captures the checkered flag in the Southern 500 for the second consecutive year. Punches his ticket to the round of 12, led over 300 laps in this one. And it was a Toyota dominance in the top five with him, Tyler Reddick, and also John Hunter Nemechek and Eric Jones as well. So I know that's a lot. Just give me your thoughts, obviously, on Chase Briscoe with the massive win to really kick off his playoff campaign and what hopes that he can end it in Phoenix as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Chase Briscoe domination at Darlington, which I was there, by the way, seemed inevitable because the 19 car has done that before at Darlington when Truex was behind the wheel. They had those kind of stink up the show performances. And then, of course, Chase Briscoe is very good at Darlington as well. He won the race, the Southern 500 a year ago when it was outside the playoffs for 1 year because of the Olympics. That's how he got into the playoffs last year. So I wouldn't say I necessarily saw this coming, but it definitely was predictable because of those two factors. And, I mean, there really wasn't much to say about the race because it was pretty much all Briscoe. I mean, he just did his thing and led a bunch of laps. And, I talked to him after the race and he said, he's watched other drivers have that kind of dominant performance and he had never had one. And so it was really good for him to be able to say at least once that he had, kind of stunk up the show and had a dominant performance at a track. And they really did own Darlington.
I guess I'll rephrase it this way for you then. Obviously, as you mentioned, he was just dominant from start to finish. He kind of mentioned in his post race, I might not have had the best long run car per se, but, my car was so good on the short run. I was kind of able to stretch out my leads to the point where, guys couldn't pass me. But the Toyota dominance, we have not seen Eric Jones, John Hummer and Nemechek probably together run up front as much as they did this past weekend. We've seen their speed get better with Legacy Motorsports. I remember in Indianapolis, they were really fast, particularly in practice and qualifying. So just kind of talk to me about the Toyota dominance per se that we saw. Normally when we think of Darlington, we think of Denny Hamlin staking up the joint for people. Well, Toyota overall was really strong this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And Toyota's definitely done that at other tracks. Richmond is one that comes to mind as a track that they dominate. Kansas is one that they dominate at a lot. Legacy Motor Club has shown spurts of this. I believe at the 500, all 5 of their cars were in like the top 7 or 8. And 2 of them, including Jimmy Johnson, were at the top 5. So they definitely have this in them. And they're absolutely having a better season than they were a year ago. It's a much improved organization. The thing for them that's been very difficult, and they're 3 years in this current configuration because, they were Petty and then they were, some other things before they finally became Legacy Motor Club as we know it now. The first 2 years of their existence, the first year they were making the switch to Toyota at the end of the year, so they got 0 Chevy support. Last year they got a lot of support, but they weren't an affiliated team. You look at like a team, and what I mean with that, they're not a Joe Gibbs affiliated team. So you look at like 2311 and you say, well, why isn't Legacy having the kind of success 2311? They're doing it all on their own. They are not affiliated with Joe Gibbs Racing. They're affiliated with Toyota and they get top tier Toyota support, but they don't get any of the notes or anything from Joe Gibbs. So last year was really kind of a little bit of like a journey of discovery for Legacy. And now you can see the pieces starting to come together. I expect them to be strong at the end of the year. John Hunter especially has shown great improvement. We've seen this out of Eric Jones before, but John Hunter has shown huge improvement. And I think by next year, they could be a team that's mentioned in the same breath as a 2311 or a Trackhouse.
Heather, kind of changing topics a little bit. ETSU football, 45-17 win over Murray State on Saturday. Don't know if you physically covered or just watched the game, but nonetheless, you had eyes on the Buccaneers. Just what'd you think about ETSU's season opening win over Murray State?
I was there, and it was expected. This ETSU team, and I know that folks in that area are very much surprised or familiar with Will Healy. He coached at Austin Peay for several years. He's now the head coach at ETSU. He's been able to bring in a lot of high-level transfers. He has a pair of former football bowl subdivision quarterbacks in Cade McNamara, who was at Michigan and Iowa, and then Jacoby Criswell, who was at North Carolina. And they co-start. I mean, they both play equal amounts. He rotates them in and out on drives, sometimes in the middle of drives. Depending on what play call, he uses them basically like receivers or running backs. And they are very good. But then they also have Charlie Browder, who was at Tennessee last year, and a couple other Power 4 transfers and a whole bunch of Group of 5 transfers. So this is a very talented ETSU football team. The expectations within the program are very high. They aren't that far removed from a trip to the quarterfinals of the FCF playoffs in 2021 when Randy Sanders was the coach, and they want to get back to that. So I would say as an opening weekend goes, it pretty much went on script for them, what this team expects to be. I do think that this week will be a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah,
Say the least. To say the least.
You mentioned Tennessee a second ago. ETSU is going to travel up to Knoxville this weekend. That's going to be the home opener for the Vols. Obviously, Tennessee is going to be favored handedly in that one. But what does a successful week look like for ETSU? Just in terms of not necessarily winning the game, but some things that they're still trying to figure out to this point.
Well, I think they want to come out healthy. That's the biggest thing. The second thing I will say is that they're not going to be intimidated. I mean, I just rattled all these guys that have played in that environment before, right? I mean, Cade McNamara, who took the first snaps, they're co-starters, but I mean, he played at Michigan. He's not going to be intimidated to come into Neyland Stadium. He's just not, right? He's played in that environment before. Charlie Browder played at UT last year. So they're certainly going to have enough people that they're going to come in with just enough swagger and arrogance to think that they can make some noise in this game. And I think successful for them is going to be that they stay competitive for a good chunk of that game, whether it's 2 quarters or 3 quarters or, 1 quarter, just to show that they have a little bit of fight. I think that that's going to be the biggest thing for them, is to just prove that they have some guys, some players, if you will. I think the depth of Tennessee will eventually, if ETSU is able to hang in there, I think the depth of Tennessee will eventually catch up with ETSU, because ETSU is not going to be able to throw the numbers out there and have the amount of athletes. But like I said, they're not intimidated in the least. We asked the Cade and Jacoby about that after the game on Saturday, and both of them kind of looked at us like we were crazy. Like, why would we be scared to go to Tennessee, right? We've done that, been there, done that, got that T-shirt. So it'll be interesting to watch.
And, talking about Cade McNamara and Jacoby Criswell, 2 guys that you mentioned were obviously power conference transfers. And kind of along this same line, I saw it firsthand this past weekend with a guy like Chris Parson at Austin Peay, who helped the Governors, beat MTSU for their first FBS win since, 87, only their second win ever. When you can get guys like that that have Power 5 experience or Power 4 experience, and you can bring them down to the FCS level. And, you mentioned not only their skill set, physically playing the game, but, kind of bringing that swagger to where they're not going to be intimidated. How important is that to the rest of the locker room?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the confidence level around this team, and the team was very good last year, right? They were third in the Southern Conference, I think, last year is where they finished in the regular season. And Trey Lamb springboarded that into a job at Tulsa, right? They were a good football team. But the confidence level and the swagger in this team is maybe as high as I've seen it since I've covered the program. And I was there for the first game when they came back in 2015 after not having football for a while. I think it's even higher than the playoff deep playoff run team of a few years ago, just because they have so many high level players who have a chip on their shoulder, right? You know that Cade and Jacoby, the reason why they're at ETSU is to try to win a national championship, because they want to prove that they can play. That didn't work out for them at North Carolina or Iowa or Michigan, and were the places that they've been, and they want to prove that maybe they deserve a shot in the NFL. Maybe they deserve a pro career. So the confidence is super high.
They're transitioning back to the NASCAR Cup Series. Obviously, the round of 16 will continue this weekend up in the St. Louis area at Worldwide Technology Raceway. Just looking at the standings going into that, obviously some guys really helped their playoff cause and their push to get to the round of 12 this past weekend. I mentioned the Toyota Brigade in 2311 with Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace moving themselves up the cut line. Some guys obviously slid of note, obviously Chase Elliott and Shane Van Gisbergen holding to that 11 and 12 spot. Also Christopher Bell up there in 10th. Guys looking on the outside looking in are Joey Logano 3 points out, Austin Dillon 8 points out, and obviously Alex Bowman and Josh Berry, who crashed in Darlington, 19 points out. Obviously, last year this race was led and won by Austin Cindric, who finds himself inside the playoffs right now. Ryan Blaney was leading heading to that last lap where he runs out of gas. So are you thinking Team Penske maybe has an edge and Ford has an edge here as they head to St. Louis this weekend. Obviously, this was a race that was not in the playoffs last year. It is now for the first time.
Yeah, St. Louis is certainly a Tim Penske-esque track. It is similar to Richmond, so I would expect them to be pretty good this weekend. But it's still a new enough track on the circuit that I don't know that any one team has a stranglehold on it. There were some teams that tested up there not too long ago. Kyle Larson was among those, and talking to the Hendrick drivers over the last couple of weeks are going to lean pretty heavily on him and what he found out in that test there. I think the Hendrick story is an interesting story just because they were out to lunch at Darlington, something you rarely see. As a group, they were just not good at Darlington, and it was something that they didn't expect. So really, I think they all four teams there, even though Chase and Alex are the ones that are in probably the greatest peril at this point, I think all four teams are concerned heading to St. Louis. Like they feel like they need to have a good run because you just never know what's going to happen at Bristol. There's a lot of factors, the tire wear, mechanical, the track is very hard on cars. There was one year in the playoffs, gosh, I think it was maybe 4 years ago now, where all of the Toyotas were breaking the same part, and it was crazy. And so you just don't want to have to depend on Bristol to get yourself, unless you're Denny Hamlin or Kyle Larson, you don't want to have to depend on Bristol to get yourself into the next round. So I think there's a lot of urgency going into St. Louis. And an interesting thing about Shane Van Gisbergen, because you mentioned he's hanging on to that last spot right now. When I talked to him at Playoff Media Day last week, I asked him, obviously the road courses are his bread and butter. Where is he the most comfortable after that? And he said the short tracks. So you look and you have a short-ish track in St. Louis and a short track in Bristol. I wouldn't necessarily write SVG off yet because he is getting better at the ovals and he feels really confident at the short tracks.
Yeah, you mentioned last week you're out on assignment doing media day last Wednesday. I wanted to ask you this question, saved it for you for a week. There's a lot of big names, obviously, to say the least, in this NASCAR Cup Series playoff field that have not won a championship yet. Of those drivers, thinking about William Byron, Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, who do you feel like is feeling maybe the most pressure going into the postseason this year to perform and try to capture that championship?
The most pressure. I mean, based on how they kind of felt in their answers on media day, I think it might be William Byron. Fair or not, I don't know. I think the most pressure is probably on Denny Hamlin, although he's come to the point where he's just like, I have 58 wins. I'm trying to get to 60 wins. If I win a championship, I win. And if I don't, I don't. And he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, regardless of championship. I mean, I think he surpassed Mark Martin as the best driver not to have a championship at this point in his career. But just based on kind of their body language and how they were going through media day, I think there's a lot of pressure on William Byron because he won the regular season championship. He's been to the championship for the last 2 years, and he still doesn't have that title. So I think he's putting a lot of pressure on himself to get a championship this year.
Absolutely. That is Heather Williams of WCYB Sports, kind enough to join us here on Main Street Sports today. Hopefully she can join us next week. We'll be previewing the high banks of Thunder Valley as the NASCAR Cup Series will round out the round of 16 at Bristol Motor Speedway. So I know Heather will be excited for that one. Heather, thank you as always for spending some time on a Wednesday and joining us here on Main Street Sports today.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Fun as always.
All right. That is Heather Williams. Calvin, one more segment to go for you, and you're done for the rest of the week. You can get your sleep until the high school football season continues. Either no games for you tomorrow, right? Just Friday.
I don't know. I haven't looked at the schedule yet.
Oh
Probably
boy.
need to hit a little volley.
Probably need to figure out which game you're going to.
Yeah, I know where I'm going on Friday, but probably need to hit a little volleyball today or tomorrow just to kind of diversify our sports section in Main Street, Clarksville this week.
There you go. So coming up after the break here on Main Street Sports today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia, Calvin and I will give you the wildest and the wackiest stories from across the globe. Our favorite segment is coming up next here, so stay with us here on Main Street Sports today.
being in Tennessee, we wanted to try to keep it as local as possible. So we have an entire section of our menu that is just dedicated to local whiskeys like Uncle Nearest, Jack Daniels, of course, George Dickel, Nelson Brothers, Greenbrier whiskey, and all of our taps are all local. From 2 o'clock until midnight, we've got food every day for you guys. A good handful of appetizers, some entrees, and a couple salads and things like that. My name is Ethan Kanata. Please come down and see us at the Pick Lobby Bar here at the Omni in Nashville.
At Delta Dental of Tennessee, we know our success begins and ends with providing superior quality service, and that includes serving those who need it most. This year, we're celebrating 25 years of giving back to the community we call home. Delta Dental, along with our Smile 180 Foundation, supports Tennessee's dental colleges and oral health education, children's hospitals, free and reduced cost dental clinics, and other like-minded charities. Here's to the next 25 plus years of ensuring healthy smiles.
There's a line that links us all. Most of the time, we don't even think about it, but it's everywhere. Illuminating our neighborhoods, empowering our businesses, and helping us to recharge. Whether it comes from our grids, the sun, or a kind heart, we believe in the power of good energy. And as your family and region continue to grow, you can trust that we'll always be there for you. Middle Tennessee Electric, bringing good energy.
Welcome back in. It is the final segment of a Wild and Wacky Wednesday here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. I'm David Wilson. That is Calvin White. We've made it thus far. Calvin's ready for his week to continue. This is his last segment. I'll be back with you tomorrow on a Throwback Thursday, where I'll be joined by our good friend and colleague Maurice Patton. But Calvin, without further ado, I'm going to turn over the controls to you for you to give us the wildest and wackiest stories from across the globe. So the mic and the baton is handed off to one Calvin White.
Yeah, we're going to start in Georgia on this Wild and Wacky Wednesday. A Georgia nonprofit earned its third Guinness World Record title by playing a game of kickball that went on for 52 consecutive hours. This group, they were raising money for charity. They gathered 27 men and 13 women to start a game of kickball at 8 a.m. Friday in Fairburn, Georgia, and the game continued for 52 straight hours. The founder of the charity said the record attempt raised more than $200,000. I grew up playing kickball. It was one of those games that you looked forward to playing when the teachers would let you go outside for recess at school. And if you were lucky enough to get some outside time in middle school, it was still a really cool and fun game to play. But I don't know if there was a type of substitution pattern that these teams had going on, but I couldn't imagine, running and kicking the ball and playing defense for over 2 straight days.
Yeah, we had a lot of substitutes. We had a lot of pitch kickers and pitch rollers in this matchup. Kickball was the childhood game for us during recess. I'll have to ask you, when you guys got in trouble in school back in the day, did you guys have sit out time or fence time where you couldn't go play, or was that everybody just got to play when you even if you were in trouble, per se the least?
Ours was worse. If you got in trouble, we had a sidewalk off to the side over by the playground. If you got in trouble, you couldn't even sit down. You had to walk the sidewalk for the rest of recess. So either way,
That sounds
reformative
punishment.
Yeah, at 10 years old, when it's 90 degrees outside, I'd rather be, playing on the slide and things like that than just walking on the sidewalk.
Yeah, and you mentioned this. This is just a really cool cause. Obviously, they raised a whole bunch of money for a good cause, and so this was something. This is cool, and this is something that David Wilson will be a part of. The eating stuff, or putting the ties around my head, and all that stuff. Having a bunch of plants per se isn't up my alley per se. But a good old kickball game where I can maybe show a little bit of the athleticism I once had. It's kind of gone down the drain over the last couple of years. I hurt when I get up off the couch or get out of the bed. But having a little fun, playing a little kickball game. with the boys and girls will be fun, and obviously doing it for a good cause is really good as well. I guess what they did was is, they had 9 people start the game, obviously, and then I assume maybe in shifts, people would show up per se and take their turn playing. Do we have a final score of how many runs were scored in this 52 hours? I'll bet a whole bunch.
We
We
do
had
we
maybe we
do
had
not.
no offensive
We
numbers or fair how many home runs we had, lead kickers, low ERAs.
we do not. There's a YouTube video attached to this. I'm not sure if Mark can bring that up, but it says this group officially earned the Guinness World Record title for the longest marathon playing kickball, and they most previously earned the record for longest softball game and longest basketball game. But the kickball game was the first attempt to include female players. So this group
Basketball
is,
game's rough because that requires me
yeah,
to actually be running up and down the court, and showing some conditioning, which, once again, I don't have. I'm good when I go to the YMCA and walk 30 minutes on the treadmill. So,
and that's a
the
contact sport too.
conditioning, yeah, I'll do the non-moving sports. So,
Absolutely. So, moving on to our next one, a little bit more wild and wacky than this one. The headline reads: Connecticut man collects more than 3,800 pairs of Crocs. Um, the lead says a Connecticut man known as the Croc King earned a Guinness World Record when his collection of Crocs was tallied at 3,569 pairs, but he said that number is already out of date. All time, this guy's going on the all time name list too. This man's name is Doogie Sandtiger. Said his fondness for the footwear began at the age of 16 due to his childhood in foster care, leaving him without the knowledge of how to tie his shoes. So it says he started his collection in 2023, or he started to seek out the world record in 2023 when he already had over 2,000 pairs. So I don't know where you accumulate this many pairs of Crocs from. Obviously, if he would have bought all of these at the same couple of locations, I would imagine they would cut my boy Doogie some slack and get him a discount on these Crocs. And also,
yeah, I
I
was
don't know,
going to ask you.
where you would
Go ahead.
store. I don't know where you would store this many pairs of Crocs.
Yeah, I don't have enough room in my closet and in my bedroom for 300 and something pair of shoes, let alone a pair of one shoe. I was going to ask you though, growing up, were you a Croc wearer?
I was when I was super little, like a toddler, just because my mom didn't want to fool with having to try and get my shoes on my feet and tie them. But yeah, I was a big Croc wearer when I was, age 5 and under.
I
Can't
think I
say I
had a
put on a pair
few.
since.
Yeah, I think I've had a few when I was younger, but the Crocs definitely have not continued as I've turned into an adult and a young man. I think it's just something you got to have a love for. When I went on vacation a couple months ago, I went to the beach. Couple people from my friend group that went with us, they wanted to stop by the Croc store in Panama City, and go and just so I was like, to theirs is their own. I stood outside and I sat on the bench and did other things while they were in the Croc store. Shopping for Crocs did not necessarily interest me, but you know, I think you hit it best. Like, good for this person for doing it. I don't know where you put all those Crocs. Like, do you have to have a storage unit just to keep all your Crocs? And I mean, how many of those pairs, like, you said 398?
Yes.
Well, there's 365 days in a year. So you can only wear, unless you're wearing these multiple pairs in a day, you're not even wearing one Croc set per year. So that's just at that point you're just collecting to say you collect.
Yeah. And I've got to ask you another important question. If you were a Croc wearer, would you rock those things in sport mode with the thing flipped back, or would you be a front facing Croc wearer?
I think I always had them flipped back. But it's like I said, it's been so long that I yeah, I can't remember, but I believe I had them flipped back.
Yeah, we were crocking out in sport mode as wee lads. But moving
We
on to
lads.
oh yeah, but moving on to our next wild and wacky. story. Fishermen over in Costa Rica, they caught a shark, and it is apparently the first documented shark that is orange. It says Garvin Watson reeled in the 6'6" nurse shark while casting his line near Tortuguero National Park in August 2024. Says he shared pictures of the catch on his Facebook page. Researchers said the shark's bright orange coloring is caused by a condition. I'm not even going to pretend I know how to pronounce this, but it says the condition causes yellow or gold pigmentation in an animal's skin, scales, or fur. And that doesn't look as dangerous or as threatening as a normal looking shark would, but no, I still have no doubt that thing would try. Yeah, I don't know if it would eat me,
Harm me.
but I don't know if it would eat me, but I'm not going to give it the chance to.
Yeah, when you pulled up the picture before you said it was a shark, I had no idea what it was because I've obviously never seen a shark of that pigmentation and that color. I would have been very confused what this big thing I'm reeling in is that's orange. Um, I don't do ocean. Like like go where I can tread and kind of stand up. But once you get to a certain point, there's things out there that or will be aggressive towards me and try to end me. So I'll try to stay where it's safe and I can enjoy the weather and the water and cool off a little bit. But David is not a deep sea swimmer and he is not a deep sea fisher as well because I would think that some bad things would happen to me if I went on a boat out in the middle of the ocean.
Absolutely no open water in the camp here on Main Street Sports today.
So I think I'm afraid. I'm not afraid because I've done it, but like a fear of mine that I'm gonna knock on wood is like being trapped or abandoned on a bridge over water. We've had like in Pensacola, there's a long, I guess bridge per se to get to Pensacola Beach from Pensacola mainland. And that bridge gets a little high over the ocean. Don't get me stuck up there. I'll have a panic attack.
Absolutely. Moving on to what's probably going to be our most wild and wacky story of the day. An Idaho man took 96 hits to the face with wet sponges in a single minute, recapturing an unusual Guinness World Record title in the process. And then producer Mark has a video here for us. The guy, his tosser isn't really that great.
He's taken the world record for most hits to the face with a sponge.
Yeah, in 1 minute. It says,
tosser, man. He needed a practice round.
Yeah, this is like watching the home run derby at the MLB All Star break.
He looks like he was doing pretty good at first. So he might have got tired.
Yeah.
Guy's also bringing his face to it like a champ.
Yeah. David Rush and frequent collaborator Jonathan Hannon previously held the record for the most wet sponges thrown in 1 minute by a team of 2 with a total of 92, but they were later beaten by another team who managed 93. The record requires the sponges thrown by one participant to strike the second participant in the face. So this is another one of those things that we talk about week in and week out where you just have to seek out a record like this. There's just no way that it exists beforehand. But I can't imagine that I would want to sit there and take 96 wet sponges to the face.
Once again, I think the record for a kickball game, 52 hours, although that might be extreme. I think that's really cool. This is just something that once again you had to seek out and previously know to want to do. I mean, I just have no desire to get pelted in the face. I know he's not throwing it super hard with wet sponges and get my face all watery and messed up just to do it. But his is their own. The guy had some help here, so obviously, hopefully, the people that are picking up the sponges were saying wetted them, threw them. They get some credit here in the record book when his name gets entered in there. But this, just the time that people do these things is kind of wild to me. With just the things that they come up with and the fact that they look that up, and try to see what the record is. I never had or never really bought. You mentioned book fair back in the day when we were kids. The Guinness World Book records of things. I never did, never looked. So I couldn't tell you what half the stuff is in there. So the fact that people look these things up is kind of wild to me.
Yeah, it says this man, he holds more than 181 Guinness World Record titles. So kudos to him. Obviously, that's his hobby, I guess you could say, is seeking out these world records. But we're going to close the show out with we're going to circle back to a little Major League Baseball. This happened a little while ago. Sports card company Topps is releasing a collectible card featuring an unlikely baseball star, a squirrel that ran onto the field during a New York Yankees game against the Boston Red Sox.
He wanted to take the mound.
Says the squirrel briefly stopped play during Friday's game when it ran out onto the field at Yankee Stadium during the top of the fourth inning and approached Yankees pitcher Max Fried on the mound. So I can't say that this is a thing that I would collect, but I'm sure that some kid that got his pack of cards from Walmart opened it up, and I'm sure he was surprised when he found them with a squirrel on it.
Yeah, it's probably the one, card he can't get autographed. Most players or most people think when they open up a deck of cards, maybe I can one day get the player on here to sign it. It'd be really cool. Well, good luck maybe getting the paw print on that one. But that said swirl, it'll be hard to track down, to say the least.
Absolutely. The animal failed to reach rally squirrel status as the Yankees went on to lose 1-0, but Topps revealed a new Topps Now card on Saturday featuring photos of the squirrel. Mark, if you scroll to the bottom of this story, you can find a link to what the card looks like. And it's got the so Mark gets this pulled up. It's got the Topps logo in the top left corner. Got the Yankees logo down there at the bottom.
As Mark does that, really good show for today as we kind of wrap up here on a wild and wacky edition of Main Street Sports Today. Looking forward to being joined tomorrow for a little Throwback Thursday. Mo Patton will be back in the seat, taking over Calvin's spot as Calvin gets ready for his weekend of college and high school football. You mentioned Austin P going to Athens to play in between the hedges. Look at that. That's a nice card. It's nuts. Furry Friend takes them out at Yankee Stadium. So a really cool card right there by Topps. Good luck maybe catching it or getting it autographed, to say the least. But another really good show here on Main Street Sports Day. Thanks as always to Heather Williams for joining us for her weekly segment, talking a little NASCAR. And big thanks to Caleb JARREAU from the Daily Times from East Tennessee to hop on and talk a little Tennessee football. Looking forward to be joined, as I mentioned, on a Throwback Thursday edition of Main Street Sports Today. Maurice Patton tomorrow. Calvin, have a good rest of your week. For all the rest of you guys, see y'all tomorrow.